piggyback on what Mr. Teschner said last hour and thank all of you. We could not do this for 30 years if we didn't have an incredible audience of students who take what they hear here and they use it and become creative and make a difference with what they have heard here and are so good about honoring people who are so vulnerable up here on stage. So give a big hand for yourself. I can feel the love in this room. And speaking of love, that is our topic here today. I'm introducing two incredible people, Sierra DeMulder and Sam Blackwell. They have a podcast titled Just Break Up. And in this podcast, they talk about all of the wonderful and terrifying and confusing things that happen in regards to love. And wouldn't it be great if you had two best friends to share all of your worries with and have them give you good advice? And that is the podcast Just Break Up. I want to tell you a couple things. First, there's merch up here because you're going to like what you hear. So there's merch up here to come up and get after the presentation. And tonight, the podcast Just Break Up Live will be done right here in the Cozy Auditorium at 7 o'clock. So, yeah, we would love to have you. We would love to have you. So without further ado, just break up.
The podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And that is how we would start our podcast and how we have started it every week for the last 5 years.
Five and a half, yeah,
years.
totally.
Sierra and I are podcast hosts who host Just Break Up, which is a podcast about relationship advice. We've been doing this for more than 5 years now. We release 3 episodes every week. And we're excited to tell you a little bit about why we started this podcast, what it is, and how we make it work for us.
Yeah. You want to tell them a little about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Sam Blackwell. I obviously am a host of a podcast, but besides that, my current work is in communications. So I work with the climate justice nonprofit that does work in the state of Minnesota to try and combat climate change. Before I did that, I did work around racial justice and gender justice in Minnesota. And before that, I worked in homelessness. So I worked with folks who are experiencing crisis and trying to make the homelessness response system work better. So you might say that I have like a bleeding heart, which is why doing this relationship advice stuff has been good for us.
And my name is Sierra DeMulder. I'm a big friend of Friend and Writers Week. I think I've attended Writers Week as a writer, the other side of my career, for 10 years maybe. I came here first when I was 24, and I am not that anymore. But in addition to being a podcast host, I am a full-time self-employed creator. I am a writer and poet, published 5 books, and I'll be presenting in a couple periods on that side of my work. But I've been really lucky to create a career from creative writing and being self-employed as a creator. And then we are a team of 3. That lovely gentleman right there, his name is Spencer Worth Davis. He goes by Big Cats. He's the producer of our podcast. He's also one of my best friends, and he he's a musician, and he has created music for like Johnson & Johnson ads and Nike ads, but also he's worked with people like Lizzo and all of the Twin Cities hip hop scene and things like that. So Spencer's really talented, and we're definitely a team of 3. We're going to talk about like making the podcast, how it works, how we got here, what we care about, and why our show has sort of been successful. But we're definitely a team of 3, so we'll be missing Spencer in that conversation. But before we were ever podcast hosts, Sam and I were friends, and so we had to do the corny thing where we gave you a little montage of our friendship and all the different hair colors I've had. Since I was, 21 is when we met?
Yeah, I think so.
So Sam and I met at a coffee shop. We were both working there while we were undergrads at the U of M, and I would like to say that we became fast friends, but Sam Yeah, he thought I was pretty and dumb.
I think that was right, yeah.
And so we did become fast friends after that small hurdle, and we mostly bonded over things like crappy breakups or, things that were going on in our life, and we created like a decade plus friendship over getting together and talking about the stuff going on in our lives. Like, I would say that was like one of our major values, or what brought us together. Both
Yeah.
bleeding hearts are people.
For sure. Yeah, we were both in lots of weird relationships with people as we were
Weird.
yeah, not
Awful.
great, I think is what I would say. And so we just got into a habit of just like, Sierra would be touring because she's a poet, so she would go off and speak at colleges or high schools. She would come to Friend, and then she would come back to Minnesota and visit me, and we would just like bond for like 3 days straight, just talking about everything that was happening in our lives, and then she would like go off again. And that was kind of our relationship. We just like talked about things in our lives that were really, that we didn't really talk with other people about, and we wanted to bring that to a wider audience.
Well, sort of, but like unintentionally. First, I want to point out that Sam and I went to go see Santa together. And then in the bottom corner, that's me reading a poem at Sam's wedding. So those are special pictures to me. But so how did the podcast start? Like I said, we were friends for a decade, and then I got, we like to say I got dumped by a loser. Somebody broke up with me even though I shouldn't have been dating them in the first place, and it made me sort of like upend my whole life. And I was also at a point in my career professionally as a poet that I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. And I knew that one of my best friends, Spencer, was a podcast producer, and I also knew that Sam and I loved to talk. And I wanted to make sort of like a passion project, so it kind of started as a joke. I think one day we were like sitting at brunch and like complaining about something, and I was like giving somebody relationship advice, and then I joked to that person like, haha, what if we started a podcast and it was relationship advice and it was called Just Break Up, because all we were saying was like, sounds like this relationship isn't right for you or whatever. So it kind of started as a joke, and then fast forward, I got dumped by that loser, and I needed something else to focus my time and energy on, and I asked them if they wanted to start a podcast with me, and they said yes. And that was 5.5 years ago. So what is it about? It's predominantly, like we said, it's a relationship advice podcast, but I think the word relationship is like the Trojan horse that the podcast gets packed up in. Like it doesn't, we talk about breakups, heartbreak, crushes, sex, consent, boundaries, things like that, whatever the letter writer writes into us about, and we'll talk about more of that later. But we obviously also talk about family relationships, coworkers, life transitions, I don't know, whatever. It's more of a holistic idea to relationship.
For sure, yeah, because the relationship part is the Trojan horse to, I think, more in-depth conversations about mental health.
Yeah.
Right, Sierra and I have been advocates of mental health, I think, for a long time, because I think both of us experienced mental health stuff early on. And so we really want to talk about the ways in which relationships affects our mental health, and how tools that we learned in therapy and through reading self-help books and all of that stuff can actually help us be in better relationship with other people as well. So it is about relationships, but it's also about the most important relationship, which is the relationship with yourself.
I hate us. Okay, so in addition, that's true. In addition to that, we obviously pull a lot from our own personal lives. Sam and I have we've been in a lot of questionable relationships. We've also really committed to therapy and the seeking inward sort of journey. So I feel like in addition to giving relationship advice, our listeners have what I would call like a parasocial relationship with us, because we share a lot about our lives. They were with us when we went through really hard things and great things, and it's very parasocial.
For sure. And it's also about our queerness. So Sierra and I are both queer. We started the podcast not really thinking about that as being like an important part of our relationship advice, but what we heard from folks who were listening to us is that our relationship advice, because it is grounded in our queerness, is actually really helpful for queer people who are like, oh, I'm getting this relationship advice from cis straight people. And then also a lot of our cis straight writer or listeners write in and say that actually the queer perspective on relationships is actually really helpful for them to look at their own relationships in ways that they hadn't before.
Yeah, because it's really about disrupting, gender norms or pre-established understandings about how we can exist in a relationship with one another. Honestly, it's about like breaking up the script of the rom-com, which I do enjoy, but they're so incredibly toxic and send such weird messages.
For sure.
So yeah, statistics about, this is like our original, I tried to include some like history photos in here, not just like of Santa, but that's like our very first logo that we had for 3 years that I made on Canva in about 5 seconds. And I was like, what about this? And you were like, great. And I'm like, oh man, now I'm stuck with yellow and black and white branding for the rest of time. So since we started in July of 2018, we have been downloaded almost 10 million total times. And we have 150 monthly downloads, and we are listened to in over 150 countries, which is pretty cool.
It is cool.
It's especially cool because podcasts, the podcast market is incredibly oversaturated. Like if any of you listen to podcasts, you know that you can open your podcast player or open Spotify and be like, there are 50 billion options to listen to right now. So I'm being genuine when I say we didn't think this was going to be successful, but a couple things led to the success, which I can talk about later, or you can ask me about in the Q&A. But we're really lucky to be like a self-sustaining podcast in that way.
So the process, how do we actually make this podcast? Well, the first thing that happens is that listeners submit questions to us. So we have a form on our website that people write their letters. And we have had over 6,500 letters submitted to date. So lots and lots of people reaching out to us for relationship advice, which is still just wild given our relationship track records. So I print them all out and I read them. And I read them looking for a couple things. So one is whether or not the thing that this person is going through is going to be appealing to a larger audience. So sometimes we get letters that are like really specific with like so many details, and it's like, should I break up with this person or not? And it can be hard to be like, well, obviously you should, but I don't know if this is going to like connect to a broader audience. I also look for like themes in the letters that we get. So for a period of time, for example, we had a lot of people writing into us about how they suddenly realized that they were bisexual and didn't know what to do about it, which was a wonderful
Bisexual
time.
panic is what it's called.
Bisexual panic is what it's called. We had a period of time recently where we had a bunch of letters from people who were like, should I talk to my ex again? Is that a good idea? So I kind of pull some things that are kind of recurring. And then I also look for things that might be unique that we haven't talked about before, or questions that are really interesting that haven't been on the podcast. And then I send them to Sierra, and Sierra makes the final pick because she is the person who makes the final pick. I don't know why we decided.
I don't know. We just decided that was like the best workload to do it. So Sam will send me a pile of like 10 to 20 letters, and I'll pare it down to 3 per episode. And we record twice a week at home. We used to record in our buddy Spencer's studio, and then I moved out of state to be with my now wife. And then I was gonna like fly back to Minnesota, and then the pandemic hit, so we kind of adapted to virtual remote recording in our home offices. We have soundboards and video, microphones, all of that stuff in our office, and we record over Zoom, record our audio separately, and then we prep. When we got asked to come speak to y'all, like I knew Writers Week, I knew what it's about, but I was like, excuse me, Christina and Russ, we do not write our scripts. We are not writers in this process, but we do prep recording. Before recording, we write notes, we talk about what we're gonna say, we have to write copy, maintain our website, and we talk about the flow of what we're gonna do in the show, but we predominantly improvise the whole show. Just talking, in the intro, the teacher described us as like your besties, and that's the vibe that we try to put across, is that like you're just at the brunch table with us talking about lives. And then we send them off to Spencer, who edits them, produces them, and uploads them to our hosting platform. And then we write the titles of the shows and the copy that you see when you click on the show, which is what helps fuel like search engine search. Like if you were like, oh my God, my partner has a eating disorder, how do I help with that? You could search that into your podcast player and hopefully one of our podcast episodes would come up.
So our podcast is free to listen to, but it is not free to make. And so one of the things that we have to think about is how do we actually make money off of this podcast? And I want to say that there's like a whole gamut of success that podcasts experience. Like Sierra said, there's like so many podcasts out there, and some of them, like Joe Rogan, make like hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and then some of them make $0. And then there's like a whole world kind of in between of folks who see some success, lots of success, medium amounts of success. Sierra and I are lucky that we've done work to monetize our podcast in ways that feel like are in alignment with who we are and what our values are, and that it's been able to support us in a meaningful way. And also, I still work a different job. Like,
I know.
Yeah, that's true, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that we get money from is advertisements. So you're probably familiar with the two different types of advertisements that exist on podcasts. One is host-read ads, which is when HelloFresh or Pros Hair Care reaches out to us and says, we want you to read an ad, we want you to try our product, and then read an ad that you'll play on your episode. Those are great because then we get free stuff, which is always exciting. And then the second one is inserted ads. So these are ads for like McDonald's or like a car that's read by someone else that gets inserted automatically into our episodes, and we make a little bit of money from that as well.
Yeah. And we also have Patreon. If you don't know what the Patreon is, it's a subscription platform for creators where supporters or listeners or whoever can subscribe to $5 a month, $10 a month, and they get rewards based on that subscription. So we, like I said, we record 2 times a week. In one of those recording sessions, we do the primary episodes for the free platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc. And then we record a second time to do the Patreon episode, which is the exclusive episode that's behind a paywall. And that's been pretty great for us because that's a great way for people to, like, they can listen without paying, and then they can decide to subscribe for $5 as a way of like tipping us or appreciating our work.
We also sell merch. We have some here if you are interested in it. And we tried doing print on demand for a while, which is when we work with a company and somebody orders something and then they print it and ship it to them. But that was very expensive, and so
It's dumb. Don't do that.
Yeah, we switched to a different model, which is that we printed everything ourselves, and then it lives in Sierra's house in her closet, which itself is expensive because we had to pay for everything up front, even though we didn't know if we were going to sell it or not. So.
Yeah, so now we sell it on our website, justbreakuppod.com, which we also have to maintain. We also occasionally do live shows. We love live shows, but honestly, the pandemic sort of changed the trajectory of those for us. So we started doing virtual live shows, and then we just started doing in-person live shows again. They're really great because podcasts, you're like I'm talking to Sam, but I'm also like talking into the void. I don't know who's listening. And at any time, there's 10 to 15,000 people listening to an episode, but I can't really imagine that. So live shows are really fun. But again, there are some upfront costs about that, like we have to fly to the place we're going to, etc. And lastly,
then there are investors. So we have had a couple of different places where we've had an investment. So Spotify made us exclusive for a while, which was really great, and then that program ended.
Yeah, they paid us a contract for a year to have us just exclusively released on Spotify, and they paid us.
And then we had a silent investor that came in and invested in some upfront costs for us, which was fine. It's fine. We don't work with them anymore.
We don't like them.
It was fine when it happened.
Yeah. But yeah, like Sam said, our show, all podcasts are free to listen to if you look up Apple Podcasts or whatever. But there's a lot of behind-the-scenes costs, and so making money on a free product has been really tricky. But we also feel really lucky that we have such a sustainable show that our listeners really support us. Okay, so some of our favorite things. I feel like since we've been doing this for so long, we've kind of come up with like our foundational ideas. One of my favorite things about this podcast is that like I learn alongside Sam and I learn alongside our listeners. And one of our favorite ideas from the show is something I had to learn is that like I can understand someone's behavior. I can understand why they're not texting me back or why they're speaking to me in that demeaning way. I can understand it and empathize them, and I still don't have to accept it. Like that behavior can be both understandable and unacceptable. I really learned on this show that like those two things can be true at the same time. You can empathize with somebody and you can also say like, I love you, I see everything you're going through, and I also am gonna remove myself from the situation. And they're both true, they're both valid at the same time.
One of the other things that we talk a lot about is the idea that somebody is giving you their 100%, even if it feels like 30% to you, right? So we get letters from folks all the time who are like, oh my gosh, I really love this person, I want to be in a relationship with this person, if only they could just give me more, right? Like I see the possibility in them. And what we have to remind people is that like that feels like 30% of their effort to you, but it's actually 100% of what they're capable of giving you, right? You're waiting for something that's not going to come to fruition because they're trying their hardest to be in a relationship with you in this moment, and it's just not enough.
Yeah. And we're honestly like, we always joke about why the heck we called our podcast Just Break Up. We kind of regret it. Even though I love that it's tongue in cheek. Like we don't just tell people to just break up unless they really should. You know, we don't want everybody's relationship to end. We want people to put in work. We want people to be vulnerable and honest and authentic to themselves. We want people to get what they deserve as, you know, their rights as humans to be respected and loved and honored. And also, I think we get a lot of toxic mixed messaging from popular culture, our parents, you know, our media, rom-coms about like what relationships are supposed to look like, and that they're supposed to be struggle, and they're supposed to be like, you know, toxic jealousy, which makes it passionate, you know, like read any ACOTAR book and you're like, oh my god, what is going on here? Anyway, this is just to say we're not like pro breaking up. We are pro working on it and staying when the work is being reciprocated in a healthy and consensual way. Yeah. So yeah, what are some like good letters that you can think of? Just like people have been like, I've been in a marriage for 10 years and now I think I want to leave, but I don't want to hurt my partner. What do I do?
Yeah, for sure. Another example that we just did recently was I had been in a situationship with this person before and things ended really weirdly. They're moving back to my city. Should I reach out to them, right? Like, is it okay for me to want to talk to them? It's a lot of like,
everyday stuff.
Everyday
like
stuff.
my sister's in an abusive relationship. How do I support her?
For sure.
Or I don't know. But we do get really chaotic letters too. You know, they probably just match our own energy. Like, for example, on Patreon, we just had somebody be like, do I need to tell my partner that I'm going off of birth control if I want to have a baby? Yes, yes, absolutely, you do. But we thought we'd share our most memorable, wildly chaotic letter. It was from a 65-year-old person who was writing to us. They'd been married since high school, and they had been like married to the high school sweetheart. High school sweetheart had like routinely cheated on them throughout their marriage. And then the letter writer wrote in and was like, offhandedly, like that, this is just like inserted this, was like, I found out my husband's now on a dating app, so now I'm catfishing him through that dating app. Yeah. I will never forget that letter.
It was wild.
And what's best is the letter writer wrote it as like an aside. It was like, and by the way, I'm catfishing him. And we were like, whoa.
Can we go back to the catfishing part?
You're catfishing your own husband on a dating app?
It was wild.
Anyway, so we do get like your normal, every day, like I feel like I'm unlovable. People never seem to commit to dating me, or my partner doesn't like my body, or am I queer enough? We get like everyday normal letters, and then we get,
And then sometimes
we're all messy. That's the TLDR, is that we're all messy. So yeah, we just wanted to talk about before we open up to questions, like what our purpose is, why we have kept doing this podcast, other than the fact that we're really lucky and we make money off of it, because that's not true of the majority of podcasts. We really believe that none of us, nobody in this room, none of your parents, none of your teachers, none of your friends were born with a manual on how to be human, and more importantly, like how to be in relationship with one another. If you are in a relationship right now, it's probably one of your first relationships, or if you are figuring out how to, to ask somebody to prom, or if you want to have sex or not, or whatever, wherever you're at in your life right now, this is the first time you're doing it, and you don't have a manual. You don't know what to do. And that's true for me when I was 23 and in my first abusive relationship. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was right or wrong for them to do to me, to treat me, right? And so I think Sam and I find a lot of empowerment over the idea that like we're all here to learn, we're all doing the best that we can right now with the knowledge and experience that we have in this moment, and we can all work together to get more of that knowledge, right? It's all about practicing being human in relationship with one another.
Yeah, we also really want to create space for queer people to talk about being in relationship with each other. We're really lucky that there's been a community that has grown around our podcast of folks who are queer or queer adjacent, who are really trying to think about what relationships can look like outside of what we've been told is the best or right way to do it. And we think it's important to have queer voices in a space that has been really dominated by people telling other people, like, this is exactly how you should do it, and if you do anything different, then there's something wrong with you. So we wanted to queer up relationship advice, which is often very sort of straight and cis-focused.
And honestly, like, it's the same advice, but like, when I got married and I Googled marriage stuff, it was like, oh, your husband will do this, and your husband will do this. It's just about being present because we exist and our experience is valid. And like Sam always talks about, like we change the world by changing how we treat one another.
Yeah, I mean, I think that relationships are the glue that sort of hold us all together. So if we can figure out how to treat ourselves and other people better, that's how things start to change, right? That's how we build community. That's how we get into a place where we're seeing each other as people with unique experiences, identities, and not just as somebody who's separate from us.
All right, so this is we were on the cover of a magazine in Minneapolis. If you're interested, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We also put out videos of our episodes for free on YouTube. You can follow us at Just Break Up Pod, and you can come to the show tonight at 7 p.m. in this auditorium. We're going to be doing a live episode answering your questions from students. If you want to submit a question, you can submit it using this QR code here, or your teachers have sent out the form and whatever. But that will be a good time, and we'll give you some relationship advice. In the meantime, I think we have a little time for questions about how to run a podcast, questions about relationships, things like that, and then we'll do some work. Anybody have a question? Yeah. Have you gotten any hate mail? Hate mail, I wouldn't describe it like hate mail, but we put our thoughts out on the internet every week for the last 5 years, and there's gonna be people who disagree with us. Nobody's like, go die. But people definitely we put out strong ideas, and people have strong opinions back to that. We did once almost get threatened to be sued by somebody who didn't like that they were referenced in a letter.
That's true. We did.
But they didn't. I mean, they had no claim. Yeah. Yeah, that happens. I don't think. I mean, okay. Oh my God, drama. But what's the drama here? What's the drama here? That the brother somehow possesses his sister? I think it's totally normal if you've grown up with this from your whole life. I would probably talk to your friend about it. What? Oh, repeating the question. The question was, I have a lifelong friend and I have a crush on his sister. Yeah. It's one of your friends here, I'm sure. I would just talk to your friend about it. I mean, it's not weird. You say, hey, how do you feel about me having a crush on your sister? Because you're a human who has feelings, and she is a human with a body and feelings. I don't know, what would you say?
I mean, I think it's not weird to have
Hey y'all, we got a couple more minutes, please.
It's not weird to have a crush on somebody. So I think you should for sure like not throw it out of the blue or keep it a secret, right? Like I don't think you need to sit on it. And I think you should talk about it with your friend. And I think you should also talk about it with your friend's sister and like shoot your shot. Maybe
Yeah,
she
I think
wants
so.
to meet you.
Maybe we're talking for that, but yeah. Say it again. Yeah, we don't hear from our letter writers after they write us. We don't even know if they listen, so we don't know what happened to the 65-year-old woman. Our advice was to ignore the catfishing and to say your husband has repeatedly cheated on you and has repeatedly promised changed behavior and has shown you what his true intentions are with you, which is like repeatedly going outside of the bounds of your agreed upon marriage, and that you definitely deserve to live a happy life. Like, she's 65, she's not in the grave yet. She deserves to find somebody who makes her feel respected and loved and desired and not like stepped upon like that. So we said break up.
We do get people who tell us how things have gone, and I would say like probably maybe 50% of them actually take our advice.
No, I think more than that. I think like 80, but I don't know. We don't hear from everybody. Some
Sure.
people send us DMs or whatever. Yeah. Queer? Go ahead, Sam.
So queer is a word that I think Sierra and I both use to kind of talk about the umbrella of LGBTQ people. So, you know, people who are not straight or not cisgender. Some folks really like that word because it feels like a big community, like a big umbrella, and some folks don't, right? Some folks prefer to be called gay or trans or whatever word they might like. So when we're talking about queerness, we're kind of talking about folks who are kind of operating outside of the idea of it's a man and a woman and they get married and love each other for the rest of their life and have babies and live in a house in the suburbs, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
great?
exactly. Yeah. What? Is that a legit question? Cool. So what's your cousin's name? Tell me. Okay. Is Alyssa in this room right now? Yeah. If you think your cousin's pretty, that's fine with me. Just don't act on it. Let me tell you. I'm talking about objectively looking at someone and saying that they are pretty. Right? Is that like a scandalous thing to say? Oh my god, alright. Whatever. Okay. I said just don't act on it. Don't act on it. I can object. This is my friend, right? Like, I'm not sexually attracted to this person, but I can objectively say, like, I think you're attractive. That's what I mean. I think we get really weird about that. And also, like, I obviously think that question was a joke, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, it changed because when we work together, Sierra and I talk over each other a lot, right? Like we interject ideas back and forth, which is harder over Zoom because there's a delay and we're not quite sure. It's harder to read body language. And I think it's actually been helpful for us because we actually...
All right, guys, I don't actually think you should date your cousin. Take a deep breath. Use some cognitive reasoning here. Sorry to interrupt. See, like that. Interrupting like that.
Exactly. So I think actually us recording separately is sometimes helpful because we get to finish our thoughts all the way through as opposed to like interrupting each other. But it definitely it did take a little time for us to get used to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
What's the most out-of-pocket letter you've ever gotten?
Probably the one, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Probably the one from the 65-year-old. It wasn't out of pocket. I don't know. What do you mean by out of pocket? Because, like, we answered that letter. We get plenty of chaotic letters that we don't answer.
Like the weirdest one that just like jaw dropped.
Actually, you know what? Remember, we did get that cousin letter.
What?
And we didn't answer it because they were like, do you remember? Doesn't matter. I don't know. Sorry. Anyway, I think what I want to say really quickly is that like people feel safe to ask us questions because it's anonymous. They get to write whatever they want there. Obviously, the question is just like trying to rile stuff, but I think that person was like, I actually don't remember what it was, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Zodiac signs. Oh my God, guess what? Oh my God, that's so cute. We have the same birthday. We're both Geminis.
which means, yeah, everybody hates us. Our birthday is June 2nd. Yeah. Oh my God, excellent question. Did we get any questions about aromanticism or asexuality? We get a ton, and I think that's the importance of queer safe spaces is that, like, yes, our relationship advice applies to everyone, but it's more inclusive. We get actually tons of questions from people saying, I'm asexual in my relationship, and how do I talk about it with my partner? Asexual, how do you define it? Like,
Asexual is not having sexual desire.
right. Yeah, so, yeah, we do. Tons of them, actually.
We also had the opportunity to interview Angela Chen, who wrote a book called Ace, which is all about asexuality. And
Yeah.
it was, I think, one of our most popular interviews because I think folks are really interested in having conversations about the differences in sexual desire that people experience, whether they're ace or allo, but like people are just experiencing sex differently, and I think it's an important conversation that we have a lot on the podcast.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Also, shout out to my speech therapist. I went when I was younger. Not speech therapist, speech as in like public speaking? Okay, well, both of those things. I did both of those things. Yeah, I think my work as a poet really played into this well because I thought about speaking on a podcast as more like a dramatic monologue that you can use tension and pauses, take your time. I will say Sam and I, because we freestyle the whole podcast, it's more like talk radio. But yeah, taking your time, slow down way more than you think, because the way we consume thoughts is a lot slower than the way we process them.
And you can convey a lot of emotion in the intonation of your speech, right? So if I'm speaking slowly and low like this, and I'm conveying some sort of maybe hard thing that I'm saying, or some sort of sad emotion. But if I'm like, la, 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 right? Like that's excitement, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can convey emotion with how we use our stuff tonally, and also like as a theater kid, like
Yeah.
that definitely helped in how I try and bring more emotion into the way that we talk into the podcast.
Cool. Can I get one more question? Yeah. Zodiac sign is like your astrology sign, like if you're Gemini, Taurus, whatever. I can't hear you. One more time. What does the zodiac mean? Probably not going to answer that right now because I'm not super into astrology. And like, I don't know if it's the right thing to talk about right now. Okay, one more podcast question about relationships or podcasts. Yeah. In what? Oh, how do I stay calm in the presence of ignorance? Like when people thought I wanted you to date your cousin? Yeah, I think it's about being sure of yourself and understanding that everybody has different worldviews. And when we're younger, we think I think apathy is the thing that we think is the safest. Like it's the safest thing to not care or to not want to learn about yourself or to be engaged or whatever. And I think, yeah, just time. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is about knowing yourself well enough to know that you are right in your own convictions and your understanding, and also that you have the capacity to learn and shift if somebody is presenting with some sort of new information. But it's hard, right? I don't think either of us is saying like, oh, it gets easier if people call you names or yell at you, right? It's still hard. It's just that I think Sierra and I have done enough to know ourselves well enough that we can kind of let the haters hate, and it doesn't affect us as much.
Yeah, and the world gets really big when you get out of high school. Like
Hey, do you have a question? Do you want to ask it? How did we kickstart it? We literally, I just texted my friend Spencer and I said, will you produce our podcast? And I asked him if he would co-host it with me. He said yes. And then because I had a poetry following already, we kind of had like a basis of listeners already. There's hosting platforms, things like that. Hey y'all, thank you so much, please.